That's my song. Okay. John, you want to get started?
Yeah, let's get to it. Thank you so much, Crystal. I really appreciate that. And thank you, everybody, for attending today. Happy summer, happy late June. I know at least for those who are in the Western Hemisphere, we are in the middle of the summer, so hopefully the heat hasn't gotten to you quite yet. But today I wanted to cover two different research techniques, very, very similar, usually have the same purposes, but today I'll be covering heat map analysis and hotspot image testing. So on a general level, what do these questions do? Or what they do is they help provide you a high-level understanding in the form of graphical representation. When you look at an image and you want to understand how your audience or how your respondents feel about it. What features do they like? What do they dislike? Outside of that, what gets their attention? They don't even have to like it or dislike it, or it's just what stands out when they look at an image, or what gets their attention. And that could be anything. It could just be a creative visual from a web design to an advertisement, even mapping, even just maps in general. If you ever wanted to get geographical data that way. To me, what makes these research techniques or these research approaches so great is that, on a big picture level, you're bridging qualitative research into quantitative findings or quantitative data. There are a lot of great research techniques that do that. You can use open-ended coding, or even text analysis or word cloud. A lot of different avenues. But the problem with those is that sometimes the steps to getting those insights can be timely. If you're doing open-ended coding, there's a lot of manual work there. If you are just reviewing open-end in general, it may take a while. It may take a while to come up with overall themes, especially when you're getting different insights from different audience members. And sometimes the ability to break down the sum of its parts can be challenging, and we may not have, it may not work. There may be questions that you have that would require following up or recontacting these respondents and asking additional questions. So that's how Heatmap and HotSpot are so helpful, is that it helps you avoid a lot of those problems. It helps bridge that qualitative and that quantitative, and it does so in a very, very efficient way, and the findings are very straightforward. Now, obviously, each of the two have their own differences, and there will be different scenarios where you'll want to use one over the other, but they definitely both offer quick and insightful exercises. So what are these differences? Well, let's get to it. But before I do that, again, thank you all for attending, and we would also like to note that lucky five attendees will receive a free 6-month trial of QuestionPro's Research Edition survey software. So certainly be on the lookout for that. All right, so let's get started. So we'll talk about heat map analysis first. And as I mentioned before, this is a graphical representation of data where individuals' values are contained within a matrix and are represented in colors. And what that does is basically gives you an instant feel of what it is that members are attracted to, or what catches their attention. And it gives you an instant feel of an area by grouping places into categories and displaying their density on a visual standpoint. So what do I mean by that? Basically, again, this could apply to maps, like in this example here, or it can apply to web pages or advertisements. And you're able to, it basically reflects what members like or dislike, gets their attention, so on and so forth. You can ask many different questions that involve heat maps or hotspot image, or even hotspot image testing. And what's cool with heat map analysis is that this kind of exercise can either involve dragging and dropping, or it can involve clicks. So what does it look like? When doing the analysis, you want to have an instant feel for your audience's behaviors or values just by visually understanding what gets their attention. in this case, the richer the colors or the more saturation, that indicates that that means that the stronger that area is liked or disliked by your audience in general, depending on what it is that you're explicitly asking them. And you're able to get a colorful representation of what an image that that members value in an image. And likewise, as I mentioned before, the more saturation, the more that means that there's representation in terms of attention, or they're from that's where most of your members are from. And likewise, lesser attention areas will reveal itself in fainter colors or in no color at all. So, again, this reflects the behavior and the choices or preferences or the attraction that respondents get in response to viewing an image. So that could be in the case of an image or a creative visual, in the case of a web page, in the case of a map, if you wanted to get a visual understanding of where your audience is represented geographically. So when do you want to use heat maps for research? So I've briefly covered this, but one key way is if you want to gather feedback on a web design. What does your audience find to be attractive or least attractive about your website or about your web page? Where is your audience most likely to navigate or click? Sometimes it's not just about what they like, but also getting into the persona of your audience and understanding if they were on this page, where would they want to go to navigate, or what buttons would they want to click? What piques their interest if they were to see a Prodigy web page or a new web page like this. Secondly, if you ever wanted to do A/B testing or concept testing for different designs or different products, this is a very helpful way. This is especially for researchers who want to test out new products, but can't decide which to go with. So that's where your audience comes in. They'll be able to point to you what they find attractive, what they find unattractive when looking at potential product options. And also, too, it helps you evaluate the best variation compared to other designs or compared to other products. And lastly, it helps you further break down the why for respondents selecting sections or areas of an image. If you've already asked your audience or have already run a different exercise evaluating different imagery, heat map analysis can really unfold the why by understanding what the most popular images of the popular areas of these certain images are, or what properties of an image that reflect why they're the most attractive or why they're the least attractive. So for an example, you can do product testing or do A/B testing. You offer in a single select question, which of these images do you prefer the most? Then you can follow up on the why by asking respondents in a heat map question to drag and drop or click, what was it about these features that made you decide that this was the most appealing image option to you? So that's just one example. So what are the advantages of heat map analysis? First one is it certainly saves time and resources, especially when you're converting qualitative data into quantitative. It saves that straining in time that you would experience if you were working with open ends, whether you were just reading open ends, or if you were going to try and do coding, or even doing text analysis as well. It can also, when looking at a heat map, when analyzing heat maps, you can immediately, from a relative standpoint, you can immediately quantify, what is most attractive to your audience as a whole. And it can be used as preliminary research, and can be a part of A/B testing, and can really offer you insights at the early stage of research, whether you're working on a product or whether you're working on a new web page or any other new creative visual like an advertisement or such. That's where it can really help you save time there. And also too, you can get a lot of really deep insights. With just one look, you can see what members like and where specifically. And it also helps again, going back to unfolding the why of what makes an object or what makes a design look more appealing than others. And then also, which also leads to higher conversion rates. And then you might be thinking to yourself, like, can you do this all with web analytics? I'm sure you can. The problem with this is that tools like Google Analytics or Mint or Kissmetrics, while they can provide you with those metrics, they can sometimes lack the detail when it comes to understanding how users engage with different designs or different web pages. So heat mapping really gives you that comprehensive overview of how your respondents react to what. Especially too when web analytics may not be a regular part of a research. Like say, for example, you were specifically you specifically needed to do heat map analysis for an ad hoc study. And having web analytics tools just isn't in the budget for your research or your analytics team. So that's where it can really be effective versus using web analytics just in general. So there are three main types of heat map analysis that are done, at least within here in QuestionPro. The most common is what we call attention maps, and this basically reveals what part of an image or a page would get the most attention. And then this can be used, through drag and drop, or you can apply clicks depending on what setting that you want to initially have set up. And it basically just reveals, you can use this for an advertisement, you can use this for a web page or a product. I think that's why it's the most commonly used, because you can apply it on so many different things. Then there are scroll maps. This is a little bit more specific, and this is really more for web pages specifically, but what this does is highlights, what part of a page or an image visitors view the most. And additionally, it also helps researchers understand just how visible, how much of the screen is visible without having to scroll, or how far people are willing to scroll before leaving the page. Like how far, where on the page are they, or how much of the page are they willing to look at, before their interest is no longer. An example of this that we can do with QuestionPro is, we can provide a link of a new or a testing or a Prodigy web page that you can preview, like through a link, and then you can follow up asking respondents to drag and drop the area that was visible to them, and then you can break down that information. Like you can follow up and ask, what device type they were using, what browser they were using. And you can really get some good, interesting insights that way. And then you can be able to break down the coordinates and understand, okay, what was visible to members, on a particular device and using what particular browser. The last type of heat mapping are click maps. So this is typically used more for web pages, or if you were trying to gather geographic information. So it could represent areas of an image or creative that individuals are attracted to, and you want to have that, data, or you want to have those findings a little bit more distinct, a little bit more exact. But also too, it could, as I mentioned before, it could reflect an image as informational or as geographic, or it can reflect an existing or new or Prodigy web page that you need to, foresee among your audience. If it's difficult to navigate, if things stand out to them that they find appealing, those are all key features as well. So we're going to move on now to hotspot image testing. And no worries if you have a lot of questions. When it comes, between these two research approaches, there's a lot of overlap, for sure. It's a feature that, they're both quick ways for respondents to provide feedback on images or other creative visuals, and they're both certainly helpful when text is not. Like, say if there's a language barrier involved, or if you're evaluating like clothing or furniture or other products that you can't really put into words, but there's things that you see visually that catch your attention, and you want members to, and you want your, as a researcher, you want to find that. But in general, what hotspot image testing is it's a feature that in which you show an image, but the sections or the areas that you want to evaluate are predefined. And so respondents can then decide to select these predefined areas and select whether they like or dislike or whatever it is that you're explicitly asking them, that your audience is able to do that. So on a general standpoint, while heat mapping is more generative when it comes to your insights, hotspot image testing is more evaluative because you're already asking the members, what do you like? Do you like or dislike these certain areas, or do you feel neutral about these certain areas? So when is hotspot testing typically used for research? Typically, just like with heat mapping, it can be used for concept testing, particularly with products. An example is in the case where you want to compare different features on similar products or similar designs. You can compare the number of likes or dislikes of a specific image. Researchers can then know right then what is most attractive or what's the most popular design within all these different concepts. And what's cool about, and I'll show you this later in the presentation, but what's really cool about hotspot testing is that all these numbers are immediately quantifiable. We're able to generate the number of clicks, the number of likes and dislikes within our analytics tool. Second reason, second time you would use hotspot image testing is for usability testing. You can conduct different website usability testing, and if you're showing different variants of website designs in an exercise, your audience can help indicate to you, whether they like some aspects on a page design or not, or if there's anything that, sometimes too, it's not what gets the most attention. It can also be what gets the least attention, and then you might want to follow up with that and understand, did we have to increase the font here, or did we have to increase the text here? If we increase this, would that catch their attention more, or would they find this page more appealing in general? And then lastly, feedback surveys. Say if a respondent ignores sections within a survey or an exercise, you can follow up with them on a creative design and then ask for their explicit feedback that way. So it's a little bit more of a hands-on, a little bit more of a fun exercise for respondents in general. So what are the advantages? Again, very similar to heat mapping. It's very quick. You can gather feedback very early in the process from your target audience, and what it is about an image or a creative visual that you need to keep or you need to consider removing or replacing. If you have the options, you have the options to set up, a thumbs up for like, a thumbs down for like, or neutral. You have two different ways. You can select it as neutral, like it doesn't make me feel anything, or you can ignore it entirely. You can do that as well. And then also it's straightforward and it's exact. You're collecting data on what exactly they like or dislike or what they are neutral to. And it's a fun exercise it's another fun exercise from your members. It's just a break away from all the text, all the button selecting, all the tedious parts that comes with, providing insights while taking a survey. So similar to the purposes of these research techniques, the setup initially is very, very similar. In fact, the first few steps, the first handful of steps, are actually are exactly the same. So what are the things that you want to do before you get into the nitty-gritty? Well, one, you want to make sure that you're applying this exercise in a survey that reaches to your target audience. That way you're really getting a persona and that you're really getting ahead of the game as far as feedback goes. And again, better, stronger conversion rates, especially for a web page or for an advertisement that you want to send out to the public. you can certainly do that. So make sure that you have your target audience in place. Select the question type within the survey. Upload the image of your choice in this exercise. In the case of heat maps, something that I do want to consider when it comes to choosing an image. Something that is important to consider is to make sure that these images have enough information within the graphic or within these graphics, and that the imagery itself is clear enough. You really want to ensure that there are no anomalies happen that could affect the overall heat map picture. Fourth, make sure you provide instructions for your members that you don't avoid any confusion or don't end up with any skewed data. Make sure they understand what they're getting themselves into, so that they have an understanding, so they can respond and fulfill your objective as a researcher. And then finally, make sure you enable the settings of your choice. I will get more into detail with both of these research techniques very shortly. But in general, the more detail and the more you specify how you want these exercises to be set up, the better the insights you will discover from the results. So for setting up heat map exercises, obviously select the question, but once you do that, you want to understand what type of analysis that you want to do. By that meaning, do you want to decide between, do you want your respondents to drag and drop, or do you want them to click specific little specific parts, specific parts of an image in terms of what they like, what they find attractive, what they don't find attractive, et cetera, et cetera. If you wanted to, typically you'll want to do drag and drop for advertisements or for web pages, in terms of like if there's a lot of creative design involved, you want to make sure that what drag and drop can do is that it allows the researchers to get a big picture in terms of your audience as a whole, of what areas were attractive to them, what really caught their attention versus what didn't. And I'll be able to show you an example of that for an advertisement, a McDonald's advertisement that I found. Secondly, what are the number of areas? What are the max number of areas that you want your respondents to select? Within QuestionPro, we have up to 20. We have each respondent can drag and drop up to as many as 20 areas on a page. If you're looking to if you're trying to have it more exclusive, or if you're trying to get your data more exact, or if you're really focusing on just a few areas, then you'll want to have fewer areas for respondents to drag and drop or to click. And we can set that up initially before the survey goes out to members. Also too, what's the background and border color for these selected areas? Typically by default, you'll want to use hot colors. Like typically red will symbolize the rich, the richest area, or the area that where members generally find to be the most attractive, or what gets their attention the most. But also it can really depend on the overall design that you're evaluating, and what respondents are reviewing. So like if the background color is red, and you want to switch the color of the saturation or the colors of what is dragged and dropped or clicked, you can do that as well. That way, it makes the contrast will help make that analysis more feasible. And then lastly, one thing that you'll want to set up if you're working in QuestionPro is the validation. Whether you want this to be a forced response, meaning members have to drag and drop an area or click on a certain feature or a certain area of an image, or if you wanted to have it optional for them. Really depends. It depends on the value of these responses. Typically you would want to force a response to get max insights, especially if sample is a concern. But if you want to make it not optional and have only those who really are going to make this exercise count and do so, they can do that. Then you can set that as optional as well. So for hotspot testing, similar to heat mapping, you want to the first step is you want to select the predefined areas that you wish to focus on. Within a creative image, there may be things that you know are constant, or that you know get the attention of members, but you really want to focus on specific areas of a map, or on a web design, or on a product, so on and so forth. So you want to select those predefined areas right away, and then you want to code those areas or label those areas as well. Because when you are able to look at data, you're able to look at it as if you were asking a single select question or a multi-select question. And that's what's very cool about this exercise, is that, by labeling, it makes you, the researcher, immediately understand what was liked, what was disliked, what respondents found neutral, so on and so forth. So labeling is a big step involved as well. And then just like with heat mapping, you can color code. What will select what respondents will like or dislike. By default, typically we'll keep the likes in green, keep dislikes in red, neutrals in blue, et cetera, et cetera. But if you want to change the color coding, you can do so through a six-digit hex code. If you really want it to reflect or have it be an extension of your brand or your product, or whatever is most feasible for you to digest when you're doing the analysis. And then, do you want to include text boxes or not? The reason for the text boxes is if you give your respondents an option to, through open-ended text, specify why they liked or why they disliked a certain area of an image. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to switch my page over and just show you some examples of the two. So I'll just cover heat map analysis first. So right here, this is an example of a McDonald's advertisement, and this is how we would initially set up. We would upload the image from our media library or from just our personal network. As you can see within settings, the way I have it set up is that you could only select a max of one area. I chose it to be drag and drop because there's so many things that you want to cover, and if I clicked a hamburger bun, people won't know if it was the bun that I found appealing or if it was just the entire burger in general. So in this case, I'd rather use drag and drop. And then we'll keep the border color black because it'll be distinguishable enough with the red background. So it'll be easy for me as a respondent. So if I just preview this, and we'll say I really liked this statement. The logo gets me every time because I'm nostalgic that way, and I found the chicken sandwich to be particularly appealing. Like that. And this is just a quick example. This is one survey that asks one question. And then, so I have one respondent. So that was an example of one respondent. But now I'm going to go into the analytics and just review what that looks like on hand. And there are multiple test responses that I would include in there. But if I went into the heat map analysis in QuestionPro, select the question the heat map question that's available. And so now what this does is it gives you a comparison of just the raw advertisement in general, and then it gives it the analytics from the array of different responses, including the ones I just gave. It gives you a general overview of what it was that members found appealing. So in this case, most respondents were a big fan of the captions and of the logo, the burgers, of course, and so on and so forth. So what do you do with this data? You can, obviously you'll pick out what respondents selected the most, what they found to be the most appealing, but also, you can run with it. There are a lot of different ways that you can run with it. You notice that all the sandwiches got a lot of attention, or they were found to be appealing by our respondents. But what happens, you can take this and run with it and say, hey, maybe, what if we were to increase the size of this chicken sandwich, or make this caption a little bigger? Then how would respondents react to that? Will this get more attention if it's larger than if it's smaller? So it's really about prioritizing the designs and the size of everything. What if we shrank these burgers down and increase this free premium chicken sandwich offer? Will that stimulate your respondent's attention or your audience's attention? So that's just an example. So that's just one example. And now I'm going to go over to an example for HotSpot image testing. Again, I just used an advertisement as an example. And the way that I have it set up within here, if I go to settings, again, same setup with border colors included. I had already had these areas predefined. I will show you when I go into preview mode. And we're going to allow comments, and we're not going to include question tips. We're going to keep this very simple. So I'm just going to preview this and then get into the persona of a respondent. See if it's faster to do. So this is the initial setup that I had in mind. I had created, I had created 8 different areas, which included the captions, imagery, the logos, the little visual effects like the coffee mugs as well, labeling, the actual raw product itself, the coffee grounds or the coffee crystals. But now here I am as a member. This is what it would look like on the members end, and then I would basically, see these predefined areas. Looking at this in hindsight, I should have used a lighter color for the borders. But now that as a respondent, I see this, and I'm a big fan of this logo. I like the caption: "Drink good coffee, get more energy." Absolutely. I wasn't a fan of coffee crystals though. And I'll just include not appealing to me, and then save that. Of course, make sure to save, and then done. So it's a bit of a so it's very straightforward, and it's one of those things. It's very binary. It's you have the option to click certain images, and you have the option to say you like or you dislike, and as well as you have the option to specify why that is. So then, how do we look at this in the analytics? And just like with heat mapping, because these are advanced research techniques or these are advanced question types, they're not easily to digest from the main dashboard or from our main analytics dashboard. And won't be made available like a basic question type would be, like a single select, a multi-select, an open-ended question, or matrix scale, anything like that. So we have a specific area for that as well. Just below heat map analysis, we have hotspot analysis. So I'll just select the question. And this gives me a breakdown of all the clicks because I have everything labeled. I'm able to see what was liked, what was disliked, and you're able to compare and contrast. As I could see here from looking at my analytics or from all the responses that came in, drink good coffee, give more energy was the most popular. So people really liked, really liked this statement or this caption. And also too, what's cool is that you can color code and compare what is liked as well as what was disliked. So, and it's all from a relative standpoint. So you can see that the red is a bit stronger, but there's less opportunity to compare, as opposed to with the likes, where you get a lot of likes here, but in comparison, not so much towards these tinier coffee mugs or toward even the larger coffee mugs or even the top brands labeling. So you're able to take a look, you're able to review this way. And in addition, if you wanted to look at the open-ended coding, this analysis is available in an export file. For me personally, I like to use Excel, just what I'm most comfortable with, and it gives you a breakdown in the delimited tab or in the delimited tab worksheet of what was selected, what they liked or disliked, but also breaks out what exactly, in particular, it also breaks out the why, like why did they select, or it gives you the open-ended columns as well that specifies why did they choose, or why did they like, or why did they dislike those sections of the image. And then you can do the same thing for heat map analysis. Like if you were working on a web page and you were trying to do scrolling analysis. Let me zoom in because that's a little far out. What the x-axis and the y-axis is able to produce are the coordinates. Now there's no finite range. It's not like from 0 to 100 or 0 to 500. These all basically measure the coordinates. The way for you to do this is to, when you're testing out an image during heat map testing, is to really grab as much of the image as possible. That way you can figure out the minimum and the max coordinates both for X and Y. And then you can do a comparison about what it is that members were able to see, how far they were able to scroll, and then within the analysis you'll see sets of X1, X2, Y1, Y2, in as many bunches as there are drag and drops that you had set up initially. So there are 20 sets of these because I had left it to a max of 20 times that members can drag and drop on that specific image. So let me just I'm just going to X back out and then so on a big picture scale, when it comes to heat map analysis, the color coding will represent the values taken by the variable in a hierarchy, and then for hotspots, it's a little bit more finite, it gets right to it. It helps. Oh, I'm sorry. And then in hotspot, it's more direct. It gives you counts and percentages, as well as comments given, and then you have the option to share that. You have the option to share that within the platform, or you can integrate those findings as well. So big picture on the whole, heat map analysis and hotspot image testing provide you with insights that wouldn't be readily available otherwise. That would even include with web analytics tools. Helps you identify areas of testing, but also too, it helps you save time by offering immediate insights, and the data is very easy to digest, and you can really compare and contrast from a relative standpoint, but also from a finite and quantitative standpoint. And it's on the respondent side, it's something fun and different for your audience or for your respondents. It's more hands-on and enjoyable experience for them. So, I hope you learned a lot today, but definitely, if you have any questions, certainly let me know. You feel free to continue commenting in the text box, in the Zoom text box. Yeah, and we look forward to answering your questions if we're not able to answer those all today.
Okay, so thanks so much, John. We do have some questions, so it's going to be pretty fun. Okay, so let's start with what are the specification for the image types that can be uploaded? Like JPEG, PNG, EPS, etc.
Very good question. I'll have to look more. I'll have to look more into that. But we do use. We are able to use JPEG and screenshots and many different files. As far as being able to upload an image like through G Suite, I'll have to look more into that. I want to say that we have that capability. But I think we have to, I think it's just a matter of, I think it depends on the level of bandwidth and just like the size of the file in general. But that's a really good question.
Okay. Can you only have one choice on a hotspot? Like, can you only have one choice on a hotspot, or can you make the borders of a hotspot not visible? How do you get rid of the text boxes you don't want if you don't want them? So I guess a little bit more like that.
So let me go back. So what I'll do. I really go back into my workspace. So unlike heat map analysis with HotSpot, there's no initial setup for how many areas that you want to have, or how many areas that you want to have selected. Like if I were to click on this image, I would already have this. These would already be predefined. But if I did want to edit, if I did want to remove, I can X out and have these, and have these go away. If you didn't want these to be a focus in your study, or if you wanted to hover different areas entirely, and if you wanted to remove some of these steps, what you can do is click and reload the same image and then include new parameters or new borders as well.
Okay, gotcha. With the drag and drop hotspot method, how do you avoid borders of boxes overlapping, causing false positives?
Good question. So initially, the way you want to have it set up is that you want to make sure that the initial point where you're creating grids is not within the range of an area that's already predefined, or an already predefined area. So I'll just label this as operands 2. But if I wanted to select if I wanted to select the entire product itself, I couldn't start from here because I'm already within a predefined area. But what I can do is I can do that and narrow it down that way. I hope that answers your question.
And then same for heat mapping. Seem like the edges of the selections overlapping will create the darkest area, not the center of what the user has selected.
Do you mind repeating that for me?
Okay. Heat mapping seems like the edges of selections overlapping will create the darkest areas, not necessarily the center of what the user has selected.
Well, in this case, by default, in this case, by default, are you saying that the more common areas are going to be the darker colors or the brighter colors?
Yes, the brighter colors.
Oh, in the brighter, yes. In this point, in this sort of sense, it gives you, what heat mapping can do is that it gives you a general overview of what it is that members found attractive. And through dragging and dropping, that's what, it gives you that generalistic and relative sort of perspective of what it is that members were to find attractive. As far as the best practice goes, it may be better to, it's one thing when you are running this practice on one image, but it's also great to test out different images as well. Like in the case of product testing, you want to get an understanding and comparing and contrasting of, what are the different variables? Like if you were to change the sizing or the placing of certain statements or certain text or certain imagery in general, like burgers, like in general the burgers. You know, if you have multiple images in place, I think that makes those findings a lot more distinctive. You can either test 3 all simultaneously together, or what you can do is, or you can test out one at a time, or out of your pool of respondents, randomly assign them to one of the 3 or 4. And then you can get representation, and you can really generate different insights that way as well. But the bright colors, that's what reflects what's most commonly selected. You will see a lot of overlap, and that's what's cool about drag and drop, is that if there was, you know, you have the option to, I can select the logo separately from the I'm loving it, or I can select it all within one, you know, within one grid. It won't matter. But what this findings show is that people found the Angus third pounder, Get Yours Today, and I'm loving it, and you know, majority of the burger selection to be the most attractive image. This is just an example. I'm sure the designs and the products that you want to test are a lot more complex looking, or you know, there may be certain things that might be certain other variables involved that you want to get the opinions of your audience. So that's basically what this imagery reflects.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that answer. Is there a use case that both question types could be used in the same survey?
Certainly. I mean, you can typically you can do that. Typically, you know, typically, let me think of the right wording for this. So typically, you can do that. Typically, though, it won't be that won't usually be the case. If that were, like for example, you can initially do heat map analysis on one image, but you know, you found out, okay, people like the McDonald's logo. That goes without saying. That's going to be on any and all advertisement that comes into play. Or yeah, everybody likes the deluxe third pounder. That goes without saying. So you want to really break down, and you really want to get more generative insights rather than or you want to get more evaluative insights rather than generative. So you can follow up with a hotspot question that only focuses on certain areas, like not including the McDonald's logo, because we already know people like the McDonald's logo, and that's not going away at all. So to answer your question, yes, you certainly can run these 2 exercises on the same survey and focusing on the same image. We're definitely capable of that. And there's nothing, I mean, I will say there's no harm in running those simultaneously in the same survey. Just from my experience, it usually, if we're ever to do that, it would be on separate studies. More as a way of following up, like, okay, to, you know, starting with heat map and then following up with hotspot image testing, and just differentiating 1 or 2 or 3 variables between each other.
Cool, great to know. And then what's the ideal audience size for this kind of question type?
That's a really good question. I mean, you want to make sure there, I mean, I wouldn't say there are any certain parameters as far as sample size goes. I think, you know, this could apply in a 1,000-person survey, a 2,000-person survey, or even a 30 or 40 respondent survey. I do suggest that if your sample size, you know, if you don't have the sample size that you want, or if there just aren't enough respondents for this survey, that to, you know, definitely set it so that they have many areas to drag and drop. That way that data is more definitive. I think for hotspot image testing doesn't matter as much, but in the case of testing out certain images, I think if you have a small sample size, you want your respondents to be able to drag and like or find appealing whatever as many areas as possible. And then if your sample size might be 1,000, 2,000 members, maybe restricted to 1 or 2 or 3 areas where they can shade. That way you're not confusing yourself, because that can be so many areas that gets clicks, but at the same time you still get a lot of, it still breaks out and you still get a relative sense of what it is that people find important and valuable when looking at an image compared to other features.
Gotcha. Great to know. Great to know. And how can you export the data into an external analytics tool, or what tools could you export it into?
So in the case of Heatmap, what we can do is we can export this into PDF. Again, that just gives you the same overall view or it gives you this analysis as well. And then as I mentioned before, with the Excel file, if you wanted to look at those specified coordinates, you can do that as well. Like in the case if you were doing scroll map analysis, you're able to download that from the main analytics dashboard. Excuse me, sorry. You're able to download that from the main analytics dashboard, and you can get those and generate those numbers as well. In the case of hotspot image testing, we would have this available if I were to go back to analytics. You'll be able to download this data from an Excel doc. You could also set up different filters. It's not available. It wouldn't be available in PDF because it's more because that differentiating or analysis is available. Wrong document. Is available on paper. If I were to go back, I lost the file that I had. But you're able to spit out this data on Excel, just as you would be able to see from the analytics dashboard or from this section of the analytics dashboard.
I was talking, but I was muted. I was like, oh, great. And then I was like, oh, shit, I'm still muted. Okay, that's awesome. And then we had one person ask, what kind of license types are these questions available on? And I just wanted to let everybody know they're available on our research edition license types. Most of the webinars that John does are available on our research edition. We really want to make sure that people understand what's available to them and how to use it. Even if it's not on your current license, you can always reach out to me or John or even Dan Fleetwood to chat about what our research license or research edition license looks like. But I think that's all we have for today. So we really thank everyone for joining us. This is John's information. He's always available to answer some questions along with myself. And we just want to thank you so much for your time. Thank you, John, for chatting with us and teaching us all about Heatmap and HotSpots.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Crystal. Yeah, definitely feel free to email me or message me on LinkedIn if you guys have any questions. Again, we really thank you for attending today's webinar. And we hope you can join us on Tuesday, July 28th, as I will be here and covering crosstab and correlation analysis. So if you're looking at your data and you want to identify patterns and trends, different correlations between parameters within your studies, feel free to sign up for this webinar. Again, that will be on Tuesday, July 28th at the same time, 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Central time. So thank you again, guys. Again, feel free to shoot me an email or message if you have any more questions. Yeah, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.
Awesome. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Crystal.